And welcome back to The Truth Matters, everyone. At the CSPOA event last week, I spoke to Paul Moore, who is running for sheriff in Clackamas County, Oregon. He explained what it means to be a constitutional sheriff and so much more. Before we jump in, here's a little bit about Paul and his message to voters.
Coming to you live from a secure and fortified location deep in the bowels of Clackamas County, Paul Moore, standing for truth, justice, and the American way, where he refuses to sacrifice truth on the altar of political correctness or political expediency. And now, here is the man I like to call Sheriff Paul Moore.
I'm Paul Moore. I'm running for Clackamas County Sheriff, and I'll be asking for your vote. Let me ask you a question. Are you satisfied with the level of service you're receiving from your current sheriff? If you're not, maybe it's time for a change. I'm a husband and a father. I'm a United States Marine. I served 6 years on active duty as a U.S. diplomat protecting classified material at embassies and consulates overseas. I also protected the lives and families of U.S. diplomats. To prepare me for this mission, I received some of the finest training available today. I'm proud to say I've owned and operated businesses. I've served many years in law enforcement as a deputy sheriff and a highly decorated Oregon State Trooper. I've held positions with a Fortune 200 company in general management and mid-level management. I've also provided security services for some of the most well-known people in our country. So in all of this, I've learned a few things. And the most important thing I've learned is communication is critical with people that I'm protecting. And as your next Clackamas County Sheriff, I'll be protecting you and your family. So I'd like to communicate with you. I want to get to know you so you can get to know me. I've started a podcast, The Paul Moore Show. We're going to live stream this on a regular basis and provide you with a number so you can talk to me directly. You can ask me questions and I'll answer those questions. I'm looking forward to visiting with you. We're going to post all this information on our website, standtallwithpaul.com. So please check us out and come and see us and visit with me. I'd like to wish you all a very happy new year. God bless you.
You'll never hear him complain. There's some things that will never change. He thanks God for what's left of his home out on the range, out where the tumbleweed grow, where he left his heart. Hey, don't you know it's a place like heaven, where the last of the cowboys go. A place like heaven, where the last of the cowboys go. Yippee-ki-yay, yeah. Yippee-ki-yay, oh. A place like heaven, where the last cowboy goes.
And here's what he had to say. And joining me now is Paul Moore, who's running for sheriff in Clackamas, Oregon. Thank you, Paul, for joining us here at the Constitutional Sheriff and Peace Officers Association Conference.
Well, it's an honor to be here. Sure.
Yeah. Well, you know, we need more constitutional sheriffs in this day and time. And so what makes a constitutional sheriff? Well, obviously one that follows the Constitution.
Sure, yes. We need more sheriffs that will stand up for the Constitution. And we have a lot of bad things happening. We've seen unprecedented things in recent weeks, months, and even years in our country, in our counties, and in our states. And constitutional sheriffs are really the fix. They're the gatekeeper that can make a difference right now, right here, where the citizens live. And that's the value of a constitutional sheriff. I've asked sheriffs all around Oregon, where I'm from, are you a constitutional sheriff? They all say, yes, Paul, I'm absolutely a constitutional sheriff. And then I asked for an example of one thing that you've done that has supported and defended the Constitution. And without exception, they say, well, I issued concealed handgun permits like it's candy. And then I get a look on my face and I say, well, Sheriff, how would you feel about this statement that concealed handgun permits are not constitutional? Because the government has no constitutional authority to give the citizens their permission to exercise their rights.
That's good.
So a lot of sheriffs don't understand what the Constitution is. They're not trained that way. And the law enforcement culture is kind of go along, get along, don't make waves. And God bless them. God bless them. They're heroes, and we need law enforcement. But we need sheriffs that can look outside their sheriff's office and with a laser focus on serving the citizens of the county. And somebody asked me once, what is the primary thing that we face in our county? And I said, well, it's the same thing we face in the state and the federal government. Is if you peel back the onion with all the problems, we've got fentanyl abuse, we've got homelessness issues, we've got sex and human trafficking, and the list goes on and on and on. And these are all horrific problems. And also, I mentioned voter integrity issues is a big problem. But when you peel back the onion, I'm convinced in my heart that the biggest problem we face is we've removed accountability from everything in our society. So what we need is we need sheriffs that have broad shoulders and thick skin and can stand up and say, you know what, I'm going to reinstill accountability with compassion, because we're all compassionate people. We love our fellow citizens. We don't want to see anybody hurting, anybody having problems. But if you don't instill accountability, accountability is what got me out of bed this morning, I got to tell you, because I came from Oregon. It was cold, and it's beautiful here in Nevada. But accountability got me here, because I knew I had to be here, and accountability helps people pull themselves up out of problems. They have to want to do it. And so that's just one example of what a constitutional sheriff can do. Now, every county is pretty much the same. County structure is built on a foundation of public safety. And over the years, people have bitten away from that foundation. It's eroded because they've removed accountability and they couch it under compassion. But there's nothing compassionate about allowing our fellow citizens to live in squalor and homeless communities where they're preyed upon. And there's drug problems, there's mental health issues, and the list goes on and on. But what we need to do is fortify that foundation of public safety by standing for the Constitution. And if we can do that as sheriffs, that is the key. That will change counties, it will change states, and it will change this nation.
You know, I look at, here we are at the CSPOA, the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. I'm looking at the banner over here that says protect, serve, uphold, and defend. Protect, serve, uphold, and defend. And, it says to restore liberty to America in a peaceful and effective manner. And so, what does there's so many sheriffs that I feel like are in name only.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That, and I've said before, the sheriff of my county said he serves at the pleasure of the DA. And that's someone that obviously doesn't understand his constitutional authority to let someone else who may not be, have the integrity, but to stand on your own. Stand on your own and be strong and stand apart, because no one has the authority that a sheriff does. The sheriff is the ultimate authority in the county. Isn't that correct?
Absolutely 100% accurate with that.
I mean, the coroner can take you out, but
well, I don't know about that. But so let me talk about Oregon, and I most states mirror what we do in Oregon. Some very smart people many years ago, they wrote a law. It's Oregon Revised 206-101. And it defines the sheriff as chief executive officer and conservator of the peace in the county. I love how those things dovetail together. Well, that's one leg of the milking stool. Chief executive officer, the primary person, not under the DA, but the primary executive, like the president is the executive of the United States, primary executive. Well, our sheriffs are the same thing in the county. Well, there's another component. That's the second leg of the milking stool, is they're elected by the people and accountable to the people. The third thing is that every sheriff across this nation is required to swear an oath to support and defend the Constitution.
yeah.
And it has to stop being ceremonial window dressing, and it has to be, when they take that oath of office, they mean it.
That's right.
That's the problem. And that's why we're here today, I believe, and we're going to hear a lot of that reinforced with the CSPOA and Sheriff Mack. But sheriffs have to stand up on the Constitution. And by doing that, they take that foundation of public safety and they start to fortify where it's been chipped away over the years. But the sheriff should be the primary person, the gatekeeper.
Yes.
The sheriff will stand up for your rights. Under COVID,
should
sheriff should not allow churches to close down, should not allow businesses to close down. We should not allow drag queens doing story time on our schools. We should not allow
Obscene.
pornography in our libraries. All these things are real things I've witnessed firsthand in our state and many states, and the sheriff can stand up against every single one of these things. That's how important this event is, and that's how important your county sheriff is.
How did the actual sheriff's position get so weak and so watered down? How did that happen?
Well, it's like everything else, removing accountability from society and every part of society, but it slowly happens, slow and incremental over time.
Well, I know that the federal government, uh, they send money to the AGs. Is that also what happens in the with the sheriff? Do they get federal funds?
Well, they do. They get federal funding,
Okay.
and they can get grants
And
for
there's
different
strings
things.
to and there's
Oh,
strings to that.
there is massive
Okay,
strings.
talk about the strings.
Well, I've made a pledge as a candidate for sheriff in Clackamas County, Oregon, that I refuse to take endorsements or seek endorsements from any organization if there's any possibility I might have to negotiate with on behalf of the citizens. Most sheriffs don't do that. And I can guarantee you, if the federal government gives you money, there are always strings attached.
Yes.
But the sheriff doesn't act on behalf of the government. The sheriff answers to the people. So the sheriff has to separate themselves. Now, the sheriff is in most states is bipartisan. You're not Democrat, you're not Republican. And what I simply say is I have firm, strong Christian conservative beliefs.
Like our country was founded on, right?
Absolutely.
I mean,
But
what's wrong with that?
We have probably 50% or better of the people in the state of Oregon would disagree with every decision I made as sheriff, but I want to be their sheriff too. And so by standing up for their rights, I ensure my rights too.
Yeah.
And so
That's good.
evil prevails when good people, good men and women do nothing, and that's
right.
what we're seeing too. I remember a couple came to me once and they said, we asked our sheriff a question that they couldn't answer. And we're going to ask you. It was like a gotcha thing. They wanted to see if I could answer it. And they said, we're concerned about drag queens doing story time with our kids in the grade schools. I said, that's not a problem. They said, what do you mean it's not a problem? Our sheriff said he'd have to talk to his attorneys and didn't know how to answer that question.
Afraid.
Yes.
Yeah. So afraid.
And I said,
fear,
you know
fear,
what?
fear.
If I hear about that happening in Clackamas County when I'm sheriff, the next day I show up at the principal's office in full uniform with children's books under my arm and say, Mr. Principal or Madam Principal, next time there's story time, can I do it as county sheriff? And let them tell me no. Again, that same principle that the reason drag queens are doing this because nobody else is. So we need to take a stand as citizens to stand up and do what's right. But here's the thing: the sheriff should be the focal point, should be the person that's pushing that, should be the person that's rallying these people to do these things, not just running the jail, not just running the sheriff's office. Important part. But that's a small part of what a sheriff does.
I like it. Being a leader, being a
leader,
nationalist.
yes.
Standing up for this country that was founded on the Constitution.
100%.
Yeah. And God.
Well, it's funny. I say all the time that my goal is to win a race for the honor to serve. And I've said that so much, and somebody came back, and I think it was kind of somebody maybe for an opponent or something, and they said, so what does that mean to you? And I said, well, that's simple. As a United States Marine, people ask all the time, they say, well, thank you for your service. Well, my common answer is, well, it was an honor to serve, because serving is honorable, 100%. And I said, well, I have a heart for service, and that's so critical because the country that we live in was founded on godly principles.
That's right.
And if you look at the Bible and you look at the Constitution, there's a lot of similarities there. They're neck and neck, maybe stated a different way. And if you even peel back the onion further, you find that a lot of the stuff, the Constitution, the laws we have, the things that make our country great, they mirror the teachings of Jesus Christ.
That's right.
You know, who was the subject, the main character in the best-selling book of all time, by the way.
That's right.
And so we need to have that realization. Now, that doesn't mean that a sheriff doesn't stand up for folks that may be Muslim and whatever. They do. That's
why we have a free country.
Absolutely. But that's where we come from, and we don't want to revise history and forget where we come from. That's also important. So,
it's interesting because I know we were talking earlier, and there's a lady here that you actually stood up for and protected.
Yes.
And I want Heather to come in and tell us her story, because Heather, thank you for joining us. Heather is really stands up for abortion, for
Against abortion.
Against abortion.
Yes.
That's what I meant to say.
I do.
Thank you for clarifying that. But against abortion, for the rights of trafficked children and women. And tell us how you two met.
Well, do you want me to go?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Well, many years ago in Oregon, I heard about Heather, and she was doing pro-life speaking and had death threats and stuff. Not remarkable in the state of Oregon, and she was going to speak on the steps of the state capitol. And her family's a little bit concerned about her safety. Heather's tough as nails, so I don't think she was too concerned. But nonetheless, she had asked me if I would, if I did security, if I could do security for her. And I said, yes, I would. And I said, well, what are you going to do? And she goes, well, I'm a pro-life speaker. And I said, well, then I'm going to do it free. And so we spent the next 4 or 5 hours together, and I got to get to know Heather. And then she left and did other things, and she's doing amazing things. I didn't see her for a long time until I was in Texas many years later. And I was there doing security for a guy named Mark Thielman, who ran for Oregon governor. And we were in Texas. And I feel somebody's wrapped their arms around me. And here's this lady, and she's pregnant. She's giving me a hug. And I said, man, people here are awful friendly. And it was Heather, and I hadn't seen her for years. And so we got back together.
She remembered you.
Absolutely. And so we've stayed in contact, and she recently called me and said, hey, you're a constitutional candidate for sheriff. There's a CSPO thing at CSPOA function you need to attend, and that's partially why I'm here.
Wow. All right, tell us your story. You have an amazing story.
Well, I'll give you the brief rundown.
Okay.
I'm actually an ambassador for CSPOA. I just moved to Kansas from the state of Texas, but I was up all the events for them down there. I do border operations with constitutional sheriffs as well as border patrol agents and constitutional militia groups in Arizona and Texas. And I started out fighting abortion specifically because doctors recommended that I terminate 3 of my 5 children. And my eldest was conceived through rape and torture, and she is the one that helped bring me from the left to the right and brought me to God. And every child thereafter brought me closer to Jesus Christ. And because of them, I wanted to fight for them to be able to inherit the republic and not, this standing in bread lines and begging for food, because that's where I see our country going. And I just felt like I had to get activated, but I was doing so in the ways that most people do, donating to pregnancy centers, helping domestic violence shelters. But Live Action News reached out to me multiple times for my son Gideon to share his story as a pro-life story, because he's the first surviving patient on record, and he was recommended for an abortion at 27 weeks in the state of Oregon. And he is now going to be 9 years old, smart, healthy, but it was 15 months in the hospital, 13 surgeries. Beautiful, beautiful story for him. And I was very nervous about sharing the story because I know the pro-abortion crowd and how violent and ruthless they can be. But God kept tapping on my shoulder, and I did it. And I said, if it saves one child like him, it'll be worth it. And I got that call several months later from a woman in Salt Lake City, Utah, whose son had the same diagnosis. And she was going to terminate. And she said, why did you choose life? Because I'm really torn. I don't believe in abortion. I'm a Latter-day Saint. I don't know. And I said, because I couldn't live with what if. What if he's the one that lives? What if he's the one that survived and I took that ability for him to fight? And so she chose life. He lived for 4 weeks. He did pass away. But she said she never would have got to smell him, to kiss him, to touch him. And that just gave me the drive to fight and fight and fight. And so I've testified at state capitals all over the country against abortion, against trafficking, against, in Oregon, medical suicide, or medical euthanasia, as I call it, is legal there. I've also, it extended to the trafficking side of things, actually going and helping and getting the women and kids away from the cartel. And I'm just a mom. And I mean,
that should be encouraging to people out there that say, what can I do? I'm just a mom. I'm just a dad. I'm nobody. Yeah.
I'm just
and that's
a mom.
what God can use. God uses nobodies to be somebody for him.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Where can people find you two?
I have a website, heatherhobbs.org, and also I'm on social media. I do bookings for John Rich, the country singer, because he's an amazing patriot. I do help with the Texas Ag Commissioner, so anyone in those places you can find me. And then Paul has his own website as well.
Yes, it's real simple. It's standtallwithpaul.com.
I like that. It has a little ring to it.
It does. It's fun.
Yeah. Well, is there anything you want to say before we go? We've got about 15 minutes, or about 10 minutes, sorry. And I just want you to just share your heart, whatever it is that you want the people to know.
Yeah, well, it's an honor to be here, and it's absolutely true that evil prevails when good men and women do nothing. And so we're here to talk to fellow patriots and people that believe in the Constitution, that believe in the founding principles of our nation, and believe that we can save this country one county at a time, one state at a time, starting locally and working that direction. So I would encourage all of you to check out the CSPOA, Constitutional Sheriff and Peace Officers Association. Go to their website, and it's just an amazing thing. You can join, you can be involved, you can support this organization. It's very important. And vote for your local county sheriffs and vet them, because the county sheriff is your gatekeeper. And that's a very, very important official to have. You got to get the right person in there, and support your candidates for county sheriff also.
Hold their feet to the fire.
Amen.
When you say, like, don't let them just in word only.
Right, right.
Yeah, good.
I just want to give a shout out to my son, Jefferson Lee Hobbs, who passed away due to COVID tyranny. And if it weren't for the CSPOA group network that I have, I don't know that I would have got the time to spend with him that I did. I had Representative Mark Fencham fly in from Arizona. He's my unofficial adopted dad.
Yep,
he was running for Secretary of State. He was supposed to be at an event speaking, and he flew to help me see my son because I wouldn't wear a mask. Kirk Lanius, who was the CSPOA director of Texas, showed up. And I'll tell you, losing a child is the hardest thing.
Yep.
But there are people all over this nation losing their children, whether it's to CPS corruption because the sheriffs won't stand up, whether it's to medical tyranny, whether it's to the school system, whether it's to the transgender ideologies. And CSPOA is fighting all of these issues. And in honor of my son, that's why I fight. In honor of my children, that's why I fight. And so I really want to encourage all of you to find some way to get civically engaged. Anyone can do anything. Even if you're elderly and disabled, you can write letters, you can send emails, you can get involved at home sitting on your couch. You can go and speak on stage like I do. You can do media interviews. You can go and run for your local school board. There's so much you can do. Do not discount yourself, and do not allow the enemy to convince you that you are worthless, because God will use you when you say yes.
That is so good. Keep going, girl. You preach it. I love it. And that's the main thing that I want people to understand, that you can make a difference. Look at it. I mean, and take whatever your life has been. God's preparing you for what your next step is.
Yes.
And turn your sorrows into triumphs. Turn your, the things that have happened to you into being a voice for others that has happened to encourage them and keep them going. You two are very much an inspiration to me, and I'm so grateful to know you, and now you guys get to know them too. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
I appreciate you so much.